Hello and welcome to the podcast Invest in You. Today we got a great guest all the way from America, Hang Black. And not only that, we don't have any co-host today. So I am alone and I'm dialing from Sweden. So Hang, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Frederick. Thank you so much for having me.
Great voice. I'm sure that people will really appreciate how nice you sound as you're in their ears, wherever they might be in the world. So nice. So people who've never come across you, I have not given you a proper introduction. The reason why we are on this podcast is we got mutual friends and connections who, for whatever reason, like both of us, for different things we do. I really like that you find sales enablement as important things to work with. So what do you actually do?
Well, thank you for asking. My role at Juniper Networks is the VP of Global Revenue Enablement. And why we use the term revenue versus sales is that I actually touch everyone who touches a customer, whether they're in sales, systems engineering, or global customer services. And when we provide enablement, it's not just technical training. It's how do we groom people, processes, and tools to make the sale better, quicker, and bigger. Don't we all like bigger, Frederick?
Yeah, bigger is sometimes better, but also you said revenue there. What is really the difference between like profitable revenue and just revenue?
Well, profitable revenue, we would make sure that we've got decent margins.
Yeah, I'm trying to be cheeky because many people listen to this podcast are owners, operators, salespeople, or at least trying to influence others. So with that in mind, not everyone who's selling is selling things which are profitable.
Right. And, that's why it's so important to have enablement, because we don't want our sellers to go in front of the customer and the first thing they do is drop price. And then now you're actually below cost and margin. Yep. So for us, it's all about how do we equip our teams with what they need in order to provide value. Yeah, right. So it's selling the value and customer outcome versus selling a product.
Yeah, today I have been studying the fine art of negotiation by rereading a great book. And I'm actually back to university at my very, very young age, because in Sweden we got a great system where you can actually do courses and it won't cost you anything. So I'm doing distance learning and really, really good things that springs to mind, things we probably all should know, things we should do, maybe not always do. So I would love to give some gold dust to the listeners, whichever field of work you might do. So before we jump in further into sales, what do you find interesting in working with other people?
Well, it's really important that regardless of who my audiences are typically internal, my sellers, again, my SEs and my services team, but they're also our external partners. Regardless of what their makeup looks like, at the end of the day, my stakeholders, customers are very, very diverse. So we need to make sure that we're collaborating with all of the diverse voices in mind when we are selling and building processes. What do we need to do to make it easier for the customer to buy, to make the customer and user experience easier and better? And in that way, we need to make sure that when we collaborate, that we collaborate with all the different voices that represent not just who our stakeholders are, but who our customers are.
Cool. And there's a term which is not so common out there. The people who know, they know. But let's shine some light on the term sales enablement. I like that one. And most people don't talk about that. So what does that mean to you?
So for enablement, again, we don't necessarily create content, but we absolutely curate content.
Yep.
So most marketing material, 67% of it, and this is, cross-industry, cross-vertical, most content is never even opened one time by a seller. 67%. So, and this has been true for the last 30 years. And, I used to be a product manager, so I get it. I loved writing my 50-page white papers. And then if the sales team didn't read it the first time, then we would just send it to them 5 more times. And now we are proliferating within the system. What we find, though, with enablement is how do we curate the right content and let our SMEs know, okay, more of this stuff that sticks and less of this content that no one ever opens. So we're not only making sure that we're doing the right things, but we're doing the right things right. That's on the content side. Then we've got another pillar that's all around processes. What processes do we need to build in to keep the selling motion consistent and relevant? So I want to make sure that I modernize how we talk to the customers and reach them where they are. Do they want to be contacted? How often do they want to be contacted? Via email, over voice, over Zoom, over LinkedIn? How do we meet them where they need to be met, and with what context? And then finally, the last pillar is around the tool stack. How are we maximizing our tool stack where we have the minimum number of tools that maximize the amount of capability, if that makes sense?
Yeah, to me, it really makes sense. And for the people where it didn't make as much sense, I will drill even further and deeper and ask, how can you use this work across the silos inside a business? So expanding this outside the sales organization, pulling in marketing, production, IT, whatever it might be. How can you engage a broad audience internally?
So to give you an idea of scale, my company has about 10,000 employees. We are a Fortune 500. Yep. We are a global company with multiple segments: service provider, enterprise, and what we call cloud or hyperscaler. We've got multiple geos. And the reason I bring all that context is to give you an idea of complexity, and yet it still can be done.
Yeah,
so I collaborate, I collaborate very, very closely. When I first came to Juniper 2.5 years ago, the very first thing I did was I made a gigantic spreadsheet from marketing ops to sales enablement. What tool stack do we use? What do we use them for? And are we maximizing them? So we look at the end-to-end machine, and then we go back to our IT friends and we make sure that those are hooked into the HR systems, to our security systems. So it is possible, but it's highly, highly cross-functional and collaborative. And we have to keep abreast of all the new stuff that comes in too. So as new tools come in, I try to do a one in, one out in the tool stack. As new tools come in, what can we archive out? Yep. And are we ensuring that every other team that we touch, whether it's marketing ops, sales ops, and IT, does it make sense within that ecosystem?
Great. So we are recording this during COVID times. This is evergreen, so whenever you might listen to it, I would like you just to recap, because it's so different parts of the world. In the last 12 months, what's the percentage of actually being in the office versus the home base have you spent so far? Yes, super roughly.
In the last 12 months, I have been in the office, the physical office, a sum total of 6 hours in 2-hour increments.
Fantastic.
So that is,
I think that says it all. I think that really sets the frame well for the next one. How do you find working in the virtual space, which we have all applied in different context over the last year plus?
I've been in high tech for nearly 3 decades, and 15 of those years I was a remote worker. I lived in Austin and reported into the Bay Area. So this is pretty normal for me.
Yep.
As much as the lockdown has really sucked, what I do say is I think that people have learned how efficient we can be from home and how effective we can be. Now, we are missing those interactive conversations.
Yes.
We're missing the dynamics. We are overworking, which I always knew. It used to be, as a remote worker, people will sometimes question if you are as effective. And I think now people are understanding what I've known for a long time, which is when you work from home, you will actually tend to overwork because your days and your nights blur.
Yep.
That being said, one of the benefits that I think we've received out of this is we know people can be productive, so we can give them more flexibility. We have a very impersonal window into people's personal worlds, so we can give a little bit more grace to people with families. And, whether they're male or female, we can give them a little bit more grace around, what does it look like to work with young children, older children, whichever.
Yes.
And the third thing is, I think it's really democratized voice. Frederick, I've just recently written a book around immigrant women in the workplace. And one of the things that I have found incredibly valuable is that we have now democratized space and voice. If you look on any Zoom screen, everyone has the same real estate. So it is up to you
yes.
to change, to show up, So what I tell people is, if you want to be seen, show up, turn your camera on. If you want to be heard, speak up. If you want to make an impact, stand up. So we now have the space and the ability to do that. And it is very uncomfortable for certain cultures. When I run global events, the Asian culture tend to be off camera. They tend to be a little more silent. But, I do encourage and coax them to have more voice. This is their opportunity. And we're finding that culture slightly shifting. And with that addition of voice, we're creating better. We're being more innovative. We're being more inclusive. And, we are being much more creative in how we solve for our customers' problems.
Yes. Yeah, super interesting. I've been working with a lot of companies just like yours, how to really expand the sales through a broad range of things, including even like deal coaching as well. So I really like what you're working with and find super interesting as well. So I miss traveling around the world and present speeches all over the world. Where have you been working physically over the last few years? And might even talk about, are you born in the US or have you moved there?
No, I'm a Vietnamese immigrant. However, I came over here into the US when I was only 2 years old.
All right.
And I grew up in the South in a very black and white world, and Asians get kind of caught in between. Are we lighter skin? Are we darker skin? And where do we, quote unquote, belong? And what that's given me is sort of a perspective of perpetual observation and learning. Yes. So in my current role, when we were pre-COVID, I was probably traveling 50% of the time globally.
Yes.
Globally. So I miss that terribly as well. But again, we're maximizing the experience.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, I think my last few international stints were quite far away. So flying from London to China and Australia on the same trip. That was one of my last journeys I did for business purposes. Then, I've been quite close to Vietnam with Thailand and so on as well. All right, good. So you are well versatile in traveling, and eventually we will allow to travel again. I often work with, if you think about your complex deal teams, like the biggest deals, when I work with them and try to help them, how can they work even more effectively? One of the key elements was when you start up a new temporary sales team, to meet face to face if possible. How can you do this team engagement for a team, for a specific project and target in mind when we are now online?
Well, I do believe that we'll never go back to fully in person. We're evolving, which is great. And a lot of these sales trends have been happening the last 2 to 3 years, where people are meeting in a virtual environment first, if they're meeting virtually at all yet, or if they meet in person at all. And once they do the homework, so it is critical for sales teams to do their homework, research your customer. And what I will say is, if you look at Forrester and Gartner, they'll show us that there have been, over the last 2 to 3 years, declines of in-person meetings, and this is pre-COVID, there has been a blurring of lines between the SDR and the commercial account manager. And then if you look at generationally, 44% of millennials don't want to meet their seller even one time, even once. They want to have a contactless experience. Now, contactless doesn't necessarily mean they never interact with them. It just means they don't contact them. So what does that mean? One of the things that we're looking at as we modernize the sales experience is to make sure that when we interact with our customers, we interact with them socially first, and we engage with them in what they are interested in. 47% of the business decision is already made before the first phone call is taken. So what does that mean? Customers are, even B2B customers, not just B2C, they're doing their research beforehand. If you have a prospect, look at what your prospect is posting on social media. What articles are they engaging in? Comment and engage with them even before you reach out for that first engagement. So that's really, really important. And then when we get back in person, then you would have earned the right to be in front of them, whether it's a virtual and then eventually in-person interaction.
Yeah, no, super interesting. And I've seen so many examples of how when that is done properly and when it's done in the not so proper way, where people just go out and hard push for their own agenda before there's any kind of like connection or interest whatsoever. LinkedIn, how do you find LinkedIn as a working platform? And again, being a woman as well, that's slightly different to be a man.
Yeah, well, I find it great because these social media platforms, just as we mentioned about, now that we're in lockdown mode, we have democratization of real estate on the screen. With LinkedIn, we have democratization of platform. And one of the beauties of LinkedIn is it's one of the few platforms that do not feel the rage economy as much as possible, right? So a lot of other tools sort of highlight, if your posts have all caps and exclamation marks, they get boosted. LinkedIn has different sets of algorithms that, again, don't fuel rage. So as a woman and as a seller, I find it's a great opportunity to create a platform, and how you use it is fairly delicate, but if used very well, it is extremely powerful. I've had many customers and partners literally follow me from company to company because they like what I have to say from a professional standpoint.
Yep.
They like my, because of that, they also trust in the companies that I will be representing in. And then they love what my social viewpoints around diversity and inclusion, because now we're seeing that 60% of companies buy not just the product, they buy on what the brand's social values are.
Yeah, no, completely agree with that as well. So with all of that in mind, we have had quite a few number of authors on this podcast, and you have written a book. What brought you to write a book in the first place, or books maybe? Well,
what I like to say is, I feel like my career as a woman, as an immigrant, and multiple layers of minorityism, so to speak. The road was much harder for me than it needs to be for anyone. And this has been kicking around in my head, and what a perfect time to write about it than a year of having nothing to do and nowhere to go. But, for me, it's been really important to pave the path for people behind me.
Yes.
So my book is called Embrace Your Edge, Pave Your Own Path as an Immigrant Woman in the Workplace. So women carry extra burdens of nurturing and caregiving, and immigrants carry extra burdens of caregiving for their elders and the guilt around, wanting to honor the sacrifices of their ancestors that have come before them. So whether you're an immigrant or a woman, it's really important for you to understand that the books for success out there won't work for you. The formulas for success out there won't work for you because they weren't written for you by people who represent your life experience.
Yes.
So it's really important for me to pass this behind. And what has been really gratifying for me is not only, immigrant women reach out and say how powerful it's been, but immigrant men have reached out, white women have reached out. And the most gratifying, Frederick, you'll find interesting, white male leaders have found it the most useful to understand our populations because we are, the thing is, these populations, they're extremely tenacious. So when I talk about navigating my career in the dark, when there's light, I can move really, really fast. I'm way faster than my peers because in general, I have to run faster and harder just to stay even when it comes to access. So you'll find all of this on hangwithhang.com.
Right.
But that's what it is. And like I said, what I really love is the white men who reach out and say, I loved it so much. I bought it for all of my male leaders. I bought it for my daughters. I bought it for my daughter-in-laws. That's been really...
That's the best you can hear as an author. Fantastic.
Yes.
Expand on the word edge. What's the edge you're talking about in the book for the people everywhere?
Thank you for asking. So what I mean by edge is we're all a little bit different. How boring would it be to conform? So we each have a competitive edge by embracing what is uniquely us and our thoughts. So when I think about minority, I don't necessarily think about race and gender. Of course, those are classic definitions of what people physically look like, but we all are extremely unique. Do I have an accent or not? Have I lived in different places or not? Was I raised by a single parent or not? We all have these different levels of, interesting things about us that I think we just need to embrace and celebrate and bring all of those elements to the table to make us, more competitive.
I love how you're explaining and expanding on that. So fantastic. I like and can relate to that. I've been working in 40 plus countries. So I am almost like a permanent immigrant wherever I might be. And people often think like, where is that accent from? Because it's been so muddled up from being everywhere all the time. And I really try to pride myself, try to learn some of the local language as well. And that's always exciting when you travel, when you actually start to care about the culture, cross-cultural learnings which are out there, which ultimately is necessary if you like to have any kind of impact when you're moving about.
Absolutely. And again, it's about observation and learning, isn't it? Learning and unlearning even.
Yes, indeed. How... Yeah. Share an example of something that you have had to unlearn over the last couple of years. It can be anything, not even work related.
Well, I will give you a work example because it's very relevant to my job role. My job role as it exists right now, even though sales enablement has existed for nearly 3 decades, the job role as it exists right now did not exist 5 years ago. And what do I mean by that? I am an engineer by education. I'm a chemical engineer with multiple patents in semiconductor manufacturing. I did that for nearly a decade. And then I went into product management, and then I went into product marketing, central marketing. During that time, there was quite a bit of lateral movement that has actually really been able to prepare me for this particular career. As I mentioned, when I was in engineering, we thought, sales and marketing, they don't know what they're talking about. When I was in marketing, I thought, the engineers, they love being nerds and they really don't understand the customer. When I landed in sales, that's when I truly understand that sales is the front line to the customer. So they're the closest conversation. So from that experience, again, this is all about cognitive diversity. I have learned that you have to bring everyone to the table. That we don't know what's right for sales and for the customers without actually talking to them and collaborating with them.
I like the sound of that. And the same thing there, to have someone to go from actually engineering into sales. That's a very, very strong way to do it. So many people in sales are unfortunately told to sell things that they might not understand. Worst
Yes.
case, something they don't even believe in. Change job.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. All right. So what do you do when you're not working too much?
Well, the past year I've been writing, so that's done. I dance. I try to dance twice a week. I try to box twice a week, and I try to lift twice a week. And then I have 2 teenagers, so we cook a lot together. We eat a lot together. So that pretty much is the sum total of my time.
Dancing. Which kind of dancing? I used to do a lot of that when I was a lot younger.
Yeah, I love ballroom dancing.
Ballroom dancing. I've done that. Yeah, I've done Latin dancing and rock and roll and all of those things as well. Love it. Miss it. And I like music, obviously, for that reason. So, right. Favorite ballroom dancing style? Which is your favorite?
Oh, favorite ballroom style. I would have to say samba and tango are my 2 favorites.
Yeah, great. Perfect. I like samba. Right. Okay, perfect. No, I like that. I've got boxing sons, or actually taekwondo boxing sons, but I can relate to that. So for the younger listeners, might be late teenagers or early 20s, what kind of career advice would you like to share with them? Because you have had some time to find your way, and it's different for everyone, like you said, with their own edge. Thoughts, ideas?
I would say don't be afraid to try different things and move around a little bit earlier in career. I don't like to say don't be afraid to fail, because that gives you an escape. I would say don't be afraid to take judicious risks. Careers are not necessarily linear, but what you really have to find is what are your strengths, what are your values, and how do those 2 align so that you can monetize them. I do think it's important to have a goal of monetizing your dreams, because again, following your passions, it's a great saying, but at the end of the day, we got to eat too, So for me, following my dreams means doing the things that I love to do, monetizing in it, and then being able to give back versus, that's my personal definition of success. But again, everyone should be allowed their own personal definition of success.
Exactly. And be kind to yourself, whatever you're saying in your own mind, because ultimately you are the judge of everything you do and how you interpret everything around you. And many people are just quick to judge. Be kind to yourself and smile, just like you're doing here.
Right.
Yeah,
that's right. Be kind to yourself and others. You never know when you're going to encounter them again.
Indeed. So in terms of your book, how and where can people follow you? You mentioned it super quickly before. Where can people find you online?
So I am most prolific on LinkedIn. Again, so it's LinkedIn/HangWithHang. My book and information about my book is on hangwithhang.com. You can also find me on Instagram and Clubhouse. I'm starting to run Thursday evening clubhouses.
Perfect.
Specifically around inclusion, diversity, and technology.
Great. So there you got it. Now you know where to find Hang if you like and like to follow her work further. And again, the book is called Embrace Your Edge. So find it out, at least if you're curious. Have you been on any other podcast you would like to recommend? Any other engaging host that has pulled out the best out of you?
Well, Lori Richards, I have been with the book coming out, which I failed to mention. You can also just get directly on Amazon. I have been on probably 2 to 3 podcasts a week. But I'd have to say my favorites are probably Lori Richards with Women in Sales, the IES, Vendor Neutral with Justin Michael has been amazing.
Great.
There's Reveal with Gong, and then Outreach. Those have been excellent podcasts. And of course, Vendor Neutral has Vingresso has a podcast for both a marketing work stream and a sales work stream.
Perfect. I'll check them out. Perfect. Those were new to me, all of them. We have had lots of guests from America lately, and we pick up lots of ideas, especially from the area around California for whatever reason, and then a couple of other low tax states as well.
I'm sure.
We have quite a following amongst digital nomads as well. People are traveling around and finding their way, which leads into another completely off-topic question. In the book I read today, they did some stats about millennials usually change jobs every third year. I think the younger people will change even faster. What's your view on the whole gig economy, which is very much expanding and exploding as we speak?
I think the gig economy is going to, continue to evolve and perchance even collapse with some of the cloud SaaS providers, because they really figured out how to crowdsource, but then they're going to need, not necessarily need, but in order to evolve to the next step, I think they will start partnering with big engines for scale, like the Amazons of the world, the Googles of the world, to have that expertise, to reach the masses.
Lovely, perfect. All right, so we have two quite unusual questions. The first one, which has been your favorite office so far? That can be anything.
My favorite office is by the beach, but I have to admit that I don't get much work done when my office is at the beach.
Yeah, sun in the keyboard. And the next one is, what does invest in you mean to yourself?
For me, that means, again, giving grace to yourself, taking care of yourself before and kind of understanding what your levers of happiness are, not other people's definitions of happiness for you, whether it's societal, cultural, familial. But really understanding what that looks like for you and investing on how do you get there to your own definition of success. So one of the tools that I talk about in my book is reflect, recalibrate, reset. Reflect on where you are today. Is it truly where you want to be going? Or are you living in a past trajectory?
Yep.
Recalibrate that trajectory and then reset. What do you need to do to get there? And that is the most difficult part because that's the actionable piece.
Yes, I like that. We just had a really good business mentor on the other week, and he said, who do you need to become to achieve basically what you want? So that's so interesting. I have a little tricky question from your LinkedIn profile. When you got the nickname Black Ops, what does that mean? I'm super curious because I used to work with similar things, but we probably mean different things.
Sure. So my father was a military man. So I have always had a deep appreciation and fascination for special operations units in the military. But the reason I got that name was during my period of consulting for a couple of years, I did sales ops, marketing ops, sales enablement, field marketing. And I just got really good at diagnosing what the issues are. What do we need to rip and replace? What do we need to fix? What gaps did we not even know that we had? And I got really good at just kind of at being a tornado to come in, fix things, and then disappear, like a big Black Ops engine. And with my last name, it just became a natural nickname.
That's great, perfect, good one. Yeah, no, I used to work with special forces for many years. I can relate. By quick in, fix the problem, quick out again, and the best to your family. Right, so you guys have all listened in to Hang and Frederick. So you have been hanging with Hang, and please find her out. Super interesting. We just scratched the surface, and I like everything I've seen so far. So on that note, any last words to the global audience from California?
I would say I will sign off the same way I do with, I autograph my books, is be limitless.
Love it. Be limitless. Thank you so much. And we'll call it a day.
Great. Thank you so much, Frederick. And goodbye to your audiences.